So today we will be talking about philosophy of sexuality. There are multiple terms and concepts that are used within the philosophy of sexuality, such as feminism, gender or sex, homosexuality, LGBTQ, or the queer theory. They are all concerned with the way our sexuality interacts with our lives and can say something about what does it mean to be human. This is quite of a modern topic. It attracted attention only from the second half of the 20th century, as we can see, for example, on the development of feminism, 1960s cultural revolutions, and liberalization. As a topic, it is causing a lot of tension in societies, and there are many still unanswered questions in philosophy, such as what is natural? Why do we have sex? Is it because of pleasure or is it because of procreation? What is the human purpose? What is the difference in common between humankind and other animals? To start off with, we should look at sexuality through an oversimplified Eurocentric perspective on the historical development of sexuality through some key philosophical eras. In the ancient Greece, we can see how gender neither sex matters. It is all about social status. We can see this on an example of pederasty, which was a socially acknowledged romantic relationship between an adult male and a young male, usually a teenager. Pederasty was used as a form of payment for teaching, where the younger male, a student, would follow his teacher and learn from him all the required skills and knowledge in order to one day replace him at his position. While the teachers were high-class citizens, this style of teaching was an important social institution among upper class. In the period of rise of Christianity, any sexual activity became a sin unless used for procreation. Sexuality, however, was not much mentioned in the Bible, but early church leaders pushed it with the help of philosophers such as Thomas Aquinas. While looking at medieval period, we can still see strong Christian influences, as the concept of sexuality did not change much from the beginning of the rise of Christianity. There were sinners who fell for their sexual temptations versus those living orderly Christian life. As we get to the Enlightenment era, with Christianity falling on power, we can see the start of development of two new clashing views on sexuality: deontology versus utilitarianism. We can explain the idea of deontology in relation to sexism on the example of homosexual sex. According to deontology, the natural function of sex is to produce an offspring, and while during homosexual sex this is not possible, it is considered wrong, while it goes against the nature of the act. Utilitarianism, on the other hand, does not concern with the nature of sex, it only weighs the benefits versus harm, and while direct benefits for the two people engaging in homosexual sex would be greater than the indirect harm that some people might experience from perceiving it as something immoral and wrong, in the eyes of utilitarianism, it would still be a moral act. Lastly, we get to the modern perspective and the notion of homosexuality of the 20th century. Here we have categories such as lesbian, gay, or trans emerging. These categories became more than sexualities. They became identities, where even people that would not engage in any sexual acts could be categorized as such: sexualization without sex. Sexuality is not natural, but rather socially constructed and culturally informed. Homosexuality as social label is distinct from any sexual activities. Those categories are rather a function of culture and society. They were assigned an identity through societal expectations, stereotypes, and socialization. This kind of thinking brought more and more highlight on the conflict of whether homosexual sexual activities are moral or not. On the one hand, we have people like Thomas Aquinas or John Finnis, who represent the natural law tradition. The main idea of this tradition is that humans, similarly to animals, engage in heterosexual coitus for procreation, and it puts a lot of emphasis on physiology and biology. Such as John Finnis stated, one's body is treated as instrumental for the securing of the experiential satisfaction of the conscious self. According to this, any sexual activity with the aim of pleasure is degrading self because we become quasi-slave of gratification. In terms of morality, natural law understands it in terms where unnatural acts are by definition morally wrong. Therefore, something like homosexuality, which is naturally wrong while it does not fulfill the procreative action, is also morally wrong. On the other hand, there are people such as Thomas Nagel who represent the secular and liberal tradition. As Thomas Nagel stated, we need to look at what is different between humans and animals. This represents the point of view, unlike natural theorists. We have to look at the things in which we are different from animals rather than looking for similarities. We can find these differences in the unique human psychology and our consciousness. We understand sex more complexly than animals. It is not only procreation, but a human activity which can have some meaning, showing love, loyalty, attraction. However, philosophers and thinkers in this tradition stress the importance of self-determination and argued that there is more to sex beyond procreation, thus pleasure can be goal in itself. Contrary to natural law tradition, for more liberal and secular theories, the key criteria would, however, be whether any harm would be caused to anybody. Naturality is not concerned. Therefore, if there is consent for the sexual act, there is nothing immoral about it. Even though these traditions are quite antagonist towards each other, they still agree on the fact that a sexual act would be morally wrong if it were dishonest, coercive, or manipulative, rape, for example. We learned today that different labels and identities used nowadays are relatively new. Someone can be gay without actually engaging in any sexual activity, which arises the question of whether it is just a category or the label has a social and cultural function. Philosophical traditions differ in their view about the purpose of sex, whether it is procreational or whether it is for pleasure. The topic is much more complicated. Drawing lines on what is natural can be really difficult within the terms of natural law, but also whether we are causing harm, liberal or secular. Concepts that philosophy spends a lot of time on, so it is navigating morality within this topic. We call for equality for all people, whatever their sexuality or identities might be. The answer is not straightforward, and you might want to stay away from jumping to any conclusions before making any judgments about others.